So, Liam, is this the end of strikes in Canada?
Well, it seems like the government is pushing in a direction that would make it easier for them to end strikes, whether it be the 1980s legislation that they've been leaning on that wasn't used until recently, and now it's been used 8 times in the last 18 months to quash strikes. So it seems like they are coming with a heavier hand against them, that's for sure.
So it could be.
Yeah, could be.
Today on True Patriot Love, I'm lucky enough to have Liam joining me, and we're going to talk about the future of strikes in Canada. Welcome, Liam.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to chatting.
So, we started the show and planning for the show, and I gave a quick story, or I shared a quick story with you. And the story was, I grew up in a unionized family. Right. And it's very interesting. Given my age, I'm not going to, I've told people I'm just turned 60 on the show before. So I lived through the 80s as a young man. And it was very interesting because my dad headed up a union in Toronto, which had roughly 6,000 team members, 6,000 employees were under the union, six brothers and sisters. And it was a very interesting time in my life because I got to see the union environment from the back end. So as a kid, I used to run sandwiches and coffees all up and down St. Clair Avenue. And this was a meat processing plant. It was a Canada Packers.
Right.
And it had, between 5,000 to 7,000 employees, depending on the time. And it had a rail yard, a stockyard. They call it the stockyards today. And the trains used to come in, the cattle used to come out and cross the street into the meat processing plant. They used to go into the kill. From the kill, it go in the processing line. From the processing line, it would be redistributed into products. And as I got older, I actually put myself through university working at Canada Packers, starting in the stockyards and going through doing night loading.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so all in a unionized environment. So, and it was interesting because my dad was very supportive. Again, they asked him basically to put everything aside and, be the steward of this union for the local. And he did. And it was a tumultuous time. They had 2 wildcat strikes. And you can imagine. So just imagine for a minute when we talk about unions, this is the major meat processing plant probably for half of Canada, 5,000 employees. So that's how much volume was coming out of this plant. So, and they were hauling like trucks. There used to be like in the morning, 400 to 500 trucks full of beef heading all from Toronto all the way up north into the lumber camps, mining camps, into Quebec. Like it was a real processing plant. And you had Schneider's was there. So it really was, something to watch how logistically this plant worked and how much it fed Canada. And they would be unhappy, and they would go out on these wildcat strikes, and they would stay out. I remember one year, they were out for like 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, these were long strikes. They were like wildcats where basically they would shut the plant down and they would blockade the plant. They would try to bring scab labor in, and they would fight them on the line as people were trying. This was not the old days. They would smash windows and fight on the streets, and then they would go at night and drink and play cards while keeping the plant closed. And then over time, as it went longer and longer, and the funds for the union dwindled, guys would kind of take off and get jobs other places until the strike ended. And that was my background. Now, that's changed a lot, mind you. And, when I dug into the show today, it changed a lot because I think the composition of union workers has changed.
Right. And as you're talking about even there, that's a private company at the time, right?
Yeah.
And you look at now where almost all of the unionized workers in Canada are public sector workers, and then too even the large share of the decline that we've seen in unionized work over the last few decades has been coming from the private sector. Now that's not unique to Canada either, right? But it does go to show that the trends are definitely changing in terms of represented work. But I think it is a very interesting question as to what the future of strikes look like, because even we've seen over the last couple years, right, the major ones such as Canada Post, that was
Yeah.
a big one. Even to the airliners as well. These, not to discount, but it's okay if you've got one industry, let's say like a meat processing plant, that's pretty, other than say a few grocery stores and stuff, it's pretty confined, right? But you shut down something like Canada Post, the ripple effects from
Oh, yeah.
that are massive. And so even I at the time, another venture that I've been working on, we were using Canada Post to ship products and stuff like that. And so when they went on strike, we went, oh, our entire online store now gone.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the ripple effects there are pretty crazy. But to even see as well how the government has changed in terms of dealing with those strikes, because yeah, they over the last few years, they've been leaning quite heavily on legislation to intervene and to shut down those strikes. And so it'll be interesting. Even right now, they are trying to decide as to whether that legislation should stay in place, whether it needs to be bolstered, removed, whether it's against the charter. So there's big discussions going on because, yeah, essentially what they've been doing is there's a specific section of the Canada Labor Code, section 107, I believe, that allows a minister to override any strike. So it doesn't even need to be voted on in Parliament, right?
Wow.
And so I think that's probably where my issue would lie with it, is that it's just all centralized and there is no essentially larger discussion or decision being made as to whether to shut down a strike. But on the other end, I do see a need for it, right? Like if you just want a better process in place for making that decision, because even now you're seeing where this labor code, it's been around since mid 1980s, as you're talking about that last kind of hot spot for strikes, but it wasn't used at all until 2023, I believe, and then since then it's been used 8 times. So
Eight times.
Yeah, so they
Wow.
just started leaning on it heavy, and so yeah, I think that's where you kind of have an issue, is when you go, oh, there's this kind of provision buried in there, and we found out we can use it, and now we're just going to start spamming it, right?
Well, yeah, let me take, because this is interesting, because you sent me over some notes for the show, and I started digging into it, and as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, how many public sector workers are there?
Right.
Yeah, so we're talking municipal, federal, and provincial. So there's roughly 4.6 million people that work in some shape or form in the government, crown corporations, publicly funded establishments, schools, universities, hospitals. So that's the number of people in there. The stats have it, coming from StatsCan, that 77% of these people are in a union. They have a collective agreement that's binding. So 3.5 million people, right? So I'm thinking, oh, wow, that's a lot of people, right? Because there's always an argument that we have here at True Patriot Love, is how many people are actually working in the country.
Right.
And, the government tells us consistently that 20 million people. So we have 42 million people now, I think, in Canada. It's probably growing every minute. But let's use it, 42 million. 20 million of them are actively working. So take out seniors, take out kids, take out people on disability, unemployment. That's the number we have. So roughly, they use 20. We can never get to that number, Liam. So I told you before the show, we struggle because when we do the math, we can only ever find 16 million people working. And we do when you take unemployment and disability and everything out of it. So for this show, I'm going to use our math. All right. Because for the listeners out there who like to test my math all the time and send me those notes about my math as well, just to give a disclaimer, right? So that really is 1 in 4 Canadians are in the public sector under a collective agreement right now.
Right.
An astonishing number if you think about it, right? So, and as far as countries go, you're not going to find a lot of countries that have 1 in 4 people in a collective agreement for the public sector job.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's a big number,
that's a
right?
lot.
For a country that only has 42 million. So you look at it, and if you look at it only, and this has gone down, it has gone down over the years. If you're in the private sector in Canada, it used to be 30% of the people, like that Canada Packers example I used, were in the union. Now it's only 15.5%.
Right.
So it's dropped in half, but that's a worldwide trend that we're seeing. So we've seen that in all the developed countries, the 32 map developed countries. You've seen unionization going down continually in private sector businesses, right? And then we can get into that in a minute. But does that mean, so when I'm kind of delayering this, I'm thinking to myself, so is the government kind of now figured out that because they've let the kind of the cat out of the bag, they're now have to figure out a way to manage it, because all these unionized employees that they've hired, they've built this mega, industry of government public sector workers. They've decided not to privatize businesses, but to actually modernize them and keep control of them. And now even, our prime minister has gone to the point where he's capitalizing projects. So I find that interesting. So now he's actually saying these are government assets, these are government workers. I'm going to run these businesses, which used to be private businesses, as our businesses.
Yep.
So, but the challenge that comes with that now is because they're unionized, how do you keep them working? And now how do you deal with them when they're unhappy?
Right.
Right. So it's your own, it's that catch-22, is it not?
Well, and I think that is the biggest aspect of this discussion here, is because you can think about it in standard terms of, okay, if you've got private companies dealing with employees, and then let's say there is a strike there that affects the national economy, then the government, you could understand, coming in as a mediator or a middleman, deciding whether to allow the strike to continue or shutting it down, as we've seen. But once the employer becomes the government, like, we're starting to see a major issue here when, okay, if you've got three parties, essentially, the negotiators, the company, and the government. Well, if now the government is two of those pieces, then I see that actually as taking more and more away from that the bargaining power of those workers and those unions. Actually, even in one of the cases, I believe it was the WestJet example, where they came in and quashed that strike. The CEO, even at the time, Michael Rousseau, he even said, "Yeah, we were banking on that the entire time. We didn't even put contingencies in place for negotiation. We didn't even worry about what we would have to do with these, what concessions we'd have to make, because we were just confident that the government was going to come in and stop it."
Yeah.
And so you would start to see more and more of that, I would assume. And then too, even as well, I think it adds an extra aspect, because even, okay, if you look at, say, the Canada Post strike, this one that I have kind of, I guess, qualms with, in the sense where you look year after year, the Canada Post revenue has been going into the drain, to the point where they're running massive deficits now. And
Billions.
And then you've got the employees collectively bargaining to raise the wages, and you just go, this goes against every single business dynamic you could ever think about. Like, how are we supposed to square these two? Especially then when you consider that it's the taxpayers that are bankrolling these deficits. Like, it's not like it's a company that's eating it. And then so that's where I see you get to this point where the taxpayers are the ones that are really eating the cost here. It's not its own little business. And so, for me, okay, our taxes are helping fund this business, but then the business shuts down and my business is affected. And so, like, what am I supposed to pay those taxes with now? And then, you just do kind of get into this downward spiral with these kind of industries that are nationalized effectively.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Let's go back for a minute, because you hit on something very interesting, which we're on the cusp of right now, and I'm trying to figure out where this is going. So we didn't see the enactment of this legislation until 23,
Hmm.
right? And, it's very interesting because strikes, and I hit on it at the beginning of the show with Canada Packers. I took a look before. I said they were much more prevalent during the 1970s and 80s, right? In 1980 alone, the number of person days not worked due to labor disputes were 9.1 million days,
Mm.
right? So this legislation came in 84 or 87. It sat on the books until now. But I was talking to you about it earlier. We at that time in the world were living through this massive inflation, and I remember my dad, because he had also a business that he ran on the side, and I remember him and being in the truck and him saying to me, "Man, I'm paying 12.5% interest, right? But I'm getting a great deal." I'm thinking,
Wow.
12.5% interest. Like it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But inflation was the same.
Hmm.
Like we were at times when interest rates and inflation were skyrocketing. People were not happy. So now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, okay, now you have this interesting time where, we have oil disruptions. We have basically affordability issues with, our tariff challenges with the U.S.
Hmm.
It's inevitable we're going to see spiking inflation. I think, though, for the people who don't think that's going to hit us, because we're also borrowing a ton of money to keep ourselves afloat
Hmm.
as a nation. And we have huge interest servicing components of our budget every year that we have to satiate to stay alive. And we've just gone out in April. We set a record bond offering sale that sold 43 of our percent of our total bond portfolio to foreign entities.
Mm.
So we're paying huge interest to them, for them to carry our debt. And now we're going to be sitting on this inflation. These people who are working, the public sector and people working in the industry who have unions are going to be coming back to the table. It's inevitable. History has shown us that that's going to happen.
Hmm.
And to your point, governments, they can keep legislating them back to work. But then I guess people at that point are going to say, that's where I think you're going to see the loggerhead, where people are going to say, okay, union, what are you doing for me now? Because my inflation's going up, my cost to live is going up, my wages aren't matching, you're my union, and they're going to be saying, well, they're going to legislate us back to work. Isn't this inevitably going to hit a wall at some point, is it not?
I would I would almost be happy if there was a wall,
Okay.
because I view it more like a spiral, because these things happen. They're positive feedback loops in a sense, where if you think, to take it outside of economics for a second, it's very similar to, say, for instance, drinking or something. Like you drink because you're stressed, but then the next day, the fact that you drank, it raised your cortisol levels. So you feel like you need to drink more, and then you just kind of end up in this spiral.
Yeah.
And I look at that very similarly to our economy, where, okay, there's a bunch of quick fixes being thrown around. Like I would see whether the government, they can only quash these things so long, as you're saying. So eventually they will cave at a certain point, but then what does that happen is then all of that is going to be the process of deficit spending. So you're just going to see more get put onto the public debt.
Yep.
And then what does more deficit spending give you is more inflation. So then you're going to have them demanding for more money. And so you're just going to kind of see this spiral. We've seen it many times before, whether it be the Argentinian economy, whether it be the Venezuelan economy, all of these kind of things, as they become more centralized and more controlled. And I think that's the real trend that we're seeing here. Even too, as you were talking about, more people are being employed by the public sector. Private sector isn't seeing that increase. And you're seeing more government spending into these projects.
Yeah.
You're seeing more essentially heavy-handedness in cracking down on the strikes and so on. And so really, when you take the meta-analysis of it, you are just seeing more and more of a centralization of the economy as a whole. And I think that's going to, as a guy that tends to follow free market principles, I see that just adding more and more to the problems. And so yeah, it's going to be yeah yeah, band-aid fix here, more inflation, band-aid fix there, more inflation, and just continue.
It is. Well, it's interesting because, with globalization, we started to see, and we talked about it earlier, we started to see unionization in the private sector decrease. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, okay, I kind of knew that. And I dug into it. And I said, why did it go down? And it went down because eventually, in order to avoid the unionization, they pushed it offshore. So, this is kind of the Donald Trump, I want to bring jobs back home. But it's a little bit of a catch-22 for him. You bring jobs back home into highly unionized industries, then you have those industries now totally controlled on your homeland. So then you have to create strike legislation that is fair to everyone.
Right.
So we've kind of balanced it. We've done it a little differently because we've actually, like you said, consolidated more public sector workers. We're trying to capitalize assets on our government books and take over projects. They're trying to do the opposite. They're trying to force more private sector jobs, but the challenge with what they're going to have is the U.S., which I worked in for 12 years, is highly unionized. So they're going to hit a highly unionized environment, and therefore they're going to be at the, kind of the beck and call of the unions to call the shot in different industries that are key, whether it be auto. We just saw the port strikes that took place in California last year, and how devastating that was to trade in the U.S. and to food supply and costing and everything else. So, he's got a whole set of other issues that by cutting off globalization, we did it, and Canadians, we've done it for the most part, like Americans were doing it in the Democratic days. We've done it by basically offshoring it.
Yep.
Yeah, we kind of, it wasn't that unions weren't here. It was that we bypassed unions by sending the jobs other places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that just reminds me of the great Thomas Sowell lesson that we could all stand to learn, which is, there's no such thing as solutions, only trade-offs. And so you get to pick your problems. You don't get to pick a life free of problems. And so, yeah, I don't think there's necessarily, one decision that would be consequence free. You essentially get to decide what the consequences you want to deal with are. But that's something I think a lot of people forget when they come, especially say on the labor side, when they are arguing for whether it be, and I'm not even saying I can't understand the drive to want these things, whether it be increased pay, whether it be more vacation days, whether it be improved work-life standards or whatever. But when you make demands to a certain point, and again, this is more general than any specific strike, but you do put a pressure onto that employer. And as you were pointing out, okay, well, you know what, we'll just move our manufacturing offshore, or, can we automate some of these jobs away and all of this kind of stuff. And so I think you do kind of end up getting into a point sometimes on the labor side where if you push for things so hard, you actually just end up maybe making the job itself go away. And so, yeah, I think globally, as you were talking about with globalization as well, I think what we're seeing is that trend start to fracture. And so I made this call back when Trump first got into office in the end of globalization that now it's going to be, you're going to see, like, prior, it was almost as if certain nations were pushing their chips and their economic chips all into a pot because globally, because it was benefiting everybody who did so. Well, now you're going to see each of those nations, whether it be Canada, whether it be America, whether it be the UK, and so on, if that shared pot is no longer growing between everybody, it's going to be a fight to see who gets to take the chips off the table. And so I think that's where you're going to see largely the economic trends go is, there's just going to be more and more battle over these kind of things, and the international pressures will definitely play a major part in them.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So, and getting to where the unions kind of are going, I took a look at the last 30 years because I was interested. Like getting ready for the show, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, globalization took the private sector unions down to half of what they were over a 30-year period, which was very interesting to me because I lived through those 30 years. And I remember all, like I said, my dad and the experiences I had. I remember running food to union halls and sitting with strike votes where they were playing cards and the company it was interesting. I went through a couple cat strikes I mentioned to you with my dad, and I would sit there in the back and I'd listen to the votes on the strike votes, and they would actually settle the strike and the company would come to them and say, we're not ready to reopen, so you got to go back and say that it was you were not going to accept it and give us 5 days to get the plant ready to reopen again, and then get your vote 3 days before. So they wouldn't, basically the vote would be done. They knew they had the vote, but they would actually delay it in order to get the plants back open. And the logistics on how they would do it and everything else was very interesting for me to watch the to and froing between the company and the union heads. Very interesting. But, I went back and took a look at the 30 years of the trade unions. And in Europe, as well as North America, we see them declining. But as globalization's taking place and offshore of jobs, Brazil, South Africa, India, Taiwan, South Korea, Costa Rica, China, Malaysia, and the Philippines, Singapore, and Taiwan all see a rapid increase in unionization. So, well, we're seeing unions kind of dissipate. They're seeing unions grow.
Yep.
So so human nature wants that representation, right? Human nature as people want that security. It's interesting, but we've kind of sucked that security out of the system by the legislatively actually adapting what we have. And, I started reading, what you sent me for the show, I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that they could actually really bypass and legislate people back to work. And we're now on the cusp of another WestJet strike. I saw it coming in today. Are they going to get legislated back to work again?
Yeah, I think that'll largely depend on what ends up happening. Because August 2nd is when they need to come back. Is when this decision is to be made in terms of, because even to when you see the public legislation, they use terms like industrial peace is as long as they can define it as we're keeping the industrial peace. Well, it's a pretty broad definition. You can make pretty much anything fit within it. Under current, if the legislation doesn't change, I would imagine you would see a strike like that get quashed pretty quickly. Probably they would let it happen to the point where the public starts getting angry, and then so when they quash it, the public goes, "Oh, thank you." Where if they do it too quickly, then the public would say, "Hey, you're not even giving these guys a listen here." But
is that an essential service? This is where I kind of struggle, Liam, a little bit. Sorry to bug.
No. Go ahead.
Is it essential?
Flights? Yeah, I mean, it's.
Is it if there's options, right? And I'm showing my age a little, right? I'm in an era where we used to drive down to Buffalo,
right,
yeah, and catch most of our flights out of Buffalo. There was a time in Canada, especially in central Canada, where flights were so cost prohibitive due to the monopoly on flight, airlines. We used to actually, it was most of my when I started my own business and I did a lot of work in the US, most of my time was spent actually on the road to Buffalo. So I used to get up at 2 a.m, get to the Buffalo airport, catch the first flight out, and when I'd be heading home, I'd fly into Buffalo, pick up my car, put on the radio and just slowly make my way back, hoping that, traffic wasn't too bad because of the long weekend or whatever. But that was kind of life. And we were all in the airport. There used to be a group of us. We used to meet each other every, couple of weeks in the airport to and fro Buffalo. Are we did it. We managed through it. Is like an airline an essential service?
Yeah, I mean,
we have couriers. Our post office essential services? I get they are like your business, but you would switch out to a courier, I guess.
Right. And that's what's tough is because who gets to define essential, right? Because even back during, say, for instance, the lockdown days, there was a lot of things where I was going, I thought that was essential, but I guess not. Or vice versa, where you go, wait, why is McDonald's essential?
Essential, yeah.
And then
It's killing me anyway.
right. And so it's kind of the eye of the beholder on that one, because I am the exact same as you in terms of, if it's even if it's pretty much anywhere in America or North America for that matter, I'd rather drive. I don't like the airports. Even for instance, once you get somewhere, I had a gig out in California at Coachella a few years ago, and I said, you know what, just toss me the plane ticket money for gas, and I'll meet you guys out there, because I'll stop along the way. Once I'm there, I've still got my car with me. I don't, or even
clothes.
or if it's something like, say, even going to Boston, 9 hours. You look at that, you go, yeah, sure, it's a 9-hour drive, but the hour drive to the airport, the 3-hour wait there, the 2-hour flight, the hour takes to unload once you're there. I'm like, it's pretty much par actually, and I'm probably more comfortable in my car. So to me, I look at that and go, yeah, it's probably not. I wouldn't classify air travel for me essential, but then yeah, who's to say there's somebody with a certain business or whatever that relies on that, like say for instance I would Canada Post for shipping products, then yeah, they would probably argue it differently. So yeah, it's definitely, I think that one's pretty tough to give an answer to. But I think when you look at as to who the one that would be dealing with the fallout, again, when a lot of these things fall under federal purview, not to say WestJet's a publicly owned company, but whether it be the airports and all of this kind of stuff, or the ports, and where you see these intertwine with public industry, then all of a sudden I think you're going to see the heavy hand go in the favor of whatever benefits the government in that decision.
Well, is it a self-fulfilling prophecy then? So are you creating, so then what you're saying is, eventually this will peter out, because the only place this was the interesting thing. So then I said, okay, we've kind of seen this trend, aside from public sector workers in Canada, where unions have been going down. So America's kind of seen it, all Europe has seen it. So we've seen this decline. Is there any place it's going up or it's stable? And it was interesting because Nordic countries are the exception. And I was like, oh, okay. So what they do is, and this is interesting, they've figured out a system where the trade unions in Denmark and Sweden and Finland have linked their unemployment compensation system to unions.
And how what's the link there that they're making?
So if you go on strike, or if you as a trade don't have a job, your benefits for unemployment are paid through the union.
Okay.
So the union. So in order to encourage trades, this is a very interesting thing to think about, right? Again, because we have shows where we talk about the lack of trades. So you're a good friend of ours, Jonathan, that's how I met him, as a trade, working on a project, and he was working too with his dad. Those days are kind of going away, where the only guys left are his dad, right? And I don't even know if his dad's, I think he's still working, but the most of the guys I'm working with on the trade side right now, when I meet, are my age,
right,
or a little younger, but they're not, they're not your age, right? They're
we're all trying to be podcasters.
No, but it's interesting. So what they did there, which was really interesting, they aligned the trade unions with their unemployment benefit systems.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Which is interesting, because that's your biggest worry about being a trade. It's not that I think more people would be in the trades if, quite frankly, they had consistency of work. And that was my fear, and I'm fairly handy, but I wouldn't say I'm a skilled tradesman, but I can pretty much, I'm an all-rounder. I can do pretty much something, a little bit of everything. And, if at that time of my life, when I was younger, if I would have had consistency of work, the challenge was, when I did end up graduating university, it was a slow economy. And quite frankly, when I looked at my options of work, I considered to be a tradesman. I had framed homes for a period of time, so I was pretty good at that. And I looked at it, but the economy was so terrible. The housing was so awful. I had all these horror stories from relatives. My name ends with an I, so quite frankly, a lot of them were in the trades, and they were telling me horror stories about the lack of work they had. So I never went there, right? But the way they've got in Nordic countries, the way they've kind of bypassed that, if they've attached the unemployment system to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I think we are going to see a natural push towards more people entering the trades as well, because even, I think a lot of the forecasting for, say, how much AI is going to drive unemployment, I think a lot of that is overestimated.
Oh yeah.
But I do think there will be obviously some shakeup. But I think you're going to see more and more people understand that trades jobs and those kind of things are actually much more solidified, or at least not on the table for getting automated at the moment. And so, I mean, if I had a kid that was 15, 16 right now, wondering which direction to go, would I push them towards a high debt education for a white collar job that might get automated away within the next 5 to 10 years, or something that's low lift, low debt amounts, plus maybe even get an apprenticeship or something along the way that you're making money while you're getting educated.
Yeah.
And then you're safer on the other side as well. And two, even like now with, especially, you look back a few decades and yeah, maybe the concern would have been how much can I rely on this work, or will I be laid off seasonally? But now even too, you could look at, say, most guys, whether, okay, if I'm going to get laid off from my my union job or whatever for a couple months, well, now there's a endless list of little side gigs and hustles that I can find on Kijiji or Facebook to go. Maybe it's just, grandma down the street needs a little renovation job in her bathroom or something. So I think you can probably fill those gaps on your own a lot more if you have the initiative. So
Oh yeah.
a little bit safer now.
Well, it's interesting. I have a bunch of friends of mine who are still, like I mentioned, they're a little older, but they're electricians, and so they're not retiring because, quite frankly, the AI electrical work they're getting right now is off the hook.
Probably good cash,
Like
too.
off the hook, like hundreds of thousands they're doing in business right now, working these projects.
Right.
And then the interesting thing, I'm just came from that Atlantic Canada tour. And so I was trying to get a fisheries show, and I got one, which was great. I got in Tignish on the northeastern tip of Canada. I got to go see the sandbar that went out a mile. I got to do an
cool.
interview with the Royal Star food guys, amazing gentlemen. But I spent some time, a couple days in PEI with friends, and when I was there, the stories of fishermen that are pulling in hundreds of thousands of dollars, getting their benefits for the winter. In addition to that, I don't know why we pay them the benefits, but we do. So they're doing really well. So, and they're guys who just worked in, at a trade their whole life that no one wants to work right now. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Crystal ball. I always like to, ask someone when we do a show, in your lifetime, are there going to be unions? Do you see it? And do you see strikes? So I guess maybe take this back. There will be unions of some shape or form, I'm sure. Will you see strikes anymore? Because right now we're down to 15% of, the private sector is unionized, very small amount. That seems to be dwindling. So, as time goes on and people switch to the gig economy and everything else, probably erodes.
Yeah, I think you're going to see, it's going to be two different ones. Yeah. In the public industries and public sectors, you're probably going to see more. But on the private side, I think we're going to see less both ways. It looks like we're seeing less and less growth in the private sector, both from employment, and you're probably going to have less of those employees protesting. And then, on the other side, on the public sector, I think it'd probably go the other way. So yeah, two different paths for two different sides of the industry there.
Yeah, I am so interested to see what happens when inflation does go up, because it's inevitable. We're going to see more inflation. So in my mind, and higher inflation. I'm just, that's where I every day think to myself, I wonder where this is going to go. So where the pushback comes, quite frankly, on the legislation once people, see their wages erode even further.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, they're going to be looking for a wage increase, so there's going to be more demand for strikes. At least, whether we'll see how the legislation shakes out as to whether they'll be able to do them as effectively, but we'll see.
Yeah. Now, this just the legislation. So take me through, where does it end up going? So now, I know they're trying to rewrite it. They're taking, notes on it? They're taking comments on it right now.
Yeah, so they're essentially trying to take this provision that's been used in the Canada Labor Code and formalize it and kind of saying like, hey, this loophole you guys found, we need to figure out what to do about it.
Right.
So part of it is trying to create a more rigid definition for what counts as industrial peace, when they can and can't use it. So they're trying to clear up that. And then also, too, you see the decision as to who gets to decide. Like, is this going to be, right now it's a specific minister that can pull the chute whenever they want, and then part of that decision that's going to be made is, okay, does it stay in a minister's hands, or does it have to go through Parliament? Would it have to create a party vote? I would be keen to see it go that direction, because to the way that I see it is, if you've got a minister that's, say, abusing those powers, then it's very easy to just go, oh, we flipped the minister, and if there's ever scandals, right? And so you can expect something different now, and then just the same game getting played. Whereas at least if it's the parties have to vote on it, then and even in that, then it will at least create a discussion and give some pressure on those parties. Let's say it's a week out is the vote to whether to quash the strike, then their constituents can get on them about it one way or the other.
Right.
Whereas if it's just a specific minister, then there isn't really any recourse for the constituents. But yeah, so it's more so as to whether those powers will be, whether more checks will be put on them. Now, I am of the mind that the current government, the current party in control of the government in general, and I mean, this is also just historically too, no matter what, you do see the government vote for the government's own interests. And so I do think that I would lean towards they are going to push things in a direction that makes it easier for them to control the outcomes of the economy.
Well, they're paying the bill, Liam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're paying the
We're
bill.
paying them. We're paying them to pay the bill.
Yeah.
All right, Liam. Thank you very much.
Good chat, Paul.
Looking for reliable and convenient personal safety products? Less Lethal has you covered. As Canada's only authorized Byrna distributor, we provide a range of products for recreation, protection, and security. Explore our Byrna launcher lineup, including the LE, SD, TCR, and Mission 4, designed for different levels of performance and protection needs. We also offer the Banshee personal safety alarm, designed to protect children, women, and vulnerable individuals. Because your safety is our top priority. Shop now at lesslethal.ca.